If you're listening to this, there's a good chance you work within the real estate investing industry. There's another good chance that you would like to increase the sales of your products or services. Well, you're in the right place. United States Real Estate Investor is a platform you need to place your brand directly in front of your target audience. With our focused, growing audience of real estate investing beginners, enthusiasts, and seasoned professionals, you can continually reach our captivated viewers and listeners with ease. To learn more or to get started today, just visit UnitedStatesRealEstateInvestor.com/advertising. That's UnitedStatesRealEstateInvestor.com/advertising. Get ready to increase your brand awareness and your bottom line. Attract clients with content.
Welcome to This Month in Real Estate Investing. In this episode, we'll be covering a variety of real estate investing news items, including North Carolina map shows underwater from sea level rise, Montana man begs for property tax moratorium, and Grant Cardone points finger at Biden. And we have a special announcement, so stick around. Don't forget, you can join the live conversation with your thoughts and questions on Facebook and YouTube during the show. All this and more on this episode of This Month in Real Estate Investing. Let's start the show. All right, I'm your host, James Brown, and I show people how to make safe, secure returns through passive investing in pre-vetted investments. To join our private investor club and get opportunity alerts, go to legacywealthcollective.com and fill out the form. If you're watching live, again, feel free to comment and ask questions. Our guests today are Michael Voulgarakis, is that right, Michael?
Close. Voulgarakis.
It's misspelled here, I think. And Will Matheson. And then, Jimmy Vreeland jumped in. Awesome. In that order, why don't you guys go ahead and briefly introduce yourselves, share your background, and what types of investing you guys focus on?
Sure. Again, my name is Michael Voulgarakis. I've been working in commercial real estate for about 18 years now, with experience in underwriting, asset management, as well as capital raising and acquisitions. I've a company called Southgate Ventures. We focus on purchasing value-add multifamily properties in the Puget Sound region of Washington State, which is essentially the Seattle market.
Oh, fantastic.
Yes, my name is Will Matheson. I'm the co-founder of Matheson Capital. I work with my twin brother, Evan. We've been buying multifamily and student housing since 2018. Our claim to fame right now is we have no floating rate debt on any of the deals where we're the lead sponsor. But yeah, we're based in Charleston, South Carolina. We're buying in North Carolina, South Carolina, and Georgia. So that's the short version.
Cool.
Jimmy Vreeland. I own Vreeland Capital. Sorry, I'm at my in-laws this week, and that light is really messing me up. So I help people build their own single-family rental portfolios through turnkey deals and Berkey deals.
Turnkey, and what was the last part?
Berkey. So, in the single family space, everybody's searching for the Burr deal. I have a one-stop shop where I have construction management and wholesaling. So we wholesale people the house, do the construction for them, get them all in at 80% of the deal. They refi out their cash and keep it going.
Oh, fantastic. All right, cool. So our special announcement. this month in real estate investing won the #1 spot of the 5 best Colorado investing podcasts on FeedSpot. It was chosen as the best podcast from thousands of podcasts on the web and ranked by relevancy, authority, social media followers, and freshness. FeedSpot enables PR professionals and podcasters to discover and rank niche podcasts, offering tools for outreach and promotion. Thank you, FeedSpot. And thanks to guests like you guys for making this a killer show. Like it wouldn't happen if you guys weren't on here sharing all your knowledge. So let's jump into the news. Let's see. First one up, North Carolina map shows where state could be underwater from sea level rise. Did you guys all get a chance to go through these and read your
Yes.
read stuff?
Yeah.
So jump in. Let's just kind of keep this loose. I don't want to have to call you guys out necessarily. And if you don't know anything about a specific subject, don't worry about it. Just say pass. Well, I don't know, or it doesn't matter. So just kind of keep things going.
I mean, look, we're all here to provide rank punditry on this stuff. So, I'll say I don't know when I'm really desperate. But as I was going to say, Michael, where in Virginia are you based? One of us is a little closer to North Carolina. I want to figure out which.
Yeah, I'm in Richmond. I go to the Outer Banks every summer. I'm very familiar with it. I do not wish it to be underwater. I mean, I don't wish any communities, to get flooded out. But
what would have to happen now we've all been living here for 300 years. What would have to happen for this event to occur? Do we have to have, I'm sniffing some catastrophic thing has to happen first, such as melting of the polar ice cap, something of that nature.
Yeah, I think that's what the article is driving at. But that aside, I mean, what my first thought is, storms out there literally change that island, and they're changing it constantly. I mean, they built a brand new. There's a main bridge that connects. The Outer Banks is made of a number of islands, and there's a main bridge there that connects 2 of the islands together. And the reason they had to rebuild this bridge, which is, it might be 10 stories tall. It's an incredible engineering feat. Is because a storm washed out the old bridge. It basically created a whole new cut between the 2 islands. And if they wanted to keep a contiguous roadway that ran up and down the Outer Banks, they had to undertake this massive project. So, but I think the article is referring to, what they're alluding to rather is climate change, right? It's going to be underwater. I hope it doesn't happen. I'm not a climate scientist, but I know from firsthand experience, the houses that we rent every year when we go out there are at best, 4 feet above the ocean, right? I mean, it's dead flat aside from the dunes.
Yeah. I've spent some time out there kiteboarding and been there when it was flooded, knee deep water and washing out the road and messing up houses.
Yeah. I mean, the keyword or the word that's doing a lot of work in this article is could. When you go and you click on the IPCC report, it talks about, projecting under 3 feet of rising water, but it says 6 feet is when you start to submerge X, Y, and Z counties. So, I mean, the article says it could happen. We can't rule it out. Well, you're putting it in the most unlikely range of possibilities at that point. So yes, it could theoretically happen, but it's not likely to happen even based on the IPCC's metrics. I mean, aside from that,
I got to be honest with you. I'm sniffing a little bit of BS from this.
Sure.
Well, I guess the takeaway is if it happens and maybe it's 300 years from now or whatever, how do you look at it as an investor?
Well, is it insurable?
That right? That's the
Currently,
big
is
question.
it insurable?
I doubt it. That must be brutal.
Yeah.
So if it's insurable, keep investing. If it's not, I'd probably not invest there.
Yeah.
But if it's insurable, have a way, get after it.
Yeah. Even then, though, like I know a guy that had an Airbnb in Corpus Christi, Texas. That storm that came in, hit Houston and stuff, it wiped out a bunch of those units, mainly the first floor. He's like, don't ever buy on the first floor there because those were all destroyed. And he said that a lot of them, even though they had insurance on them, they were locked up in, I don't know, some litigation or something for years. They never unwrapped themselves from that. So even if you do have insurance, it can still be a big problem. So
yeah, I mean, look, it's everybody's preference that their properties are not destroyed in one way or another. If you're investing on the coast, you have coastal exposure. If you're invested in the center of the country, you have tornado risk. If you're invested in California or Colorado, there's wildfire risk. I mean, there's risk in investing. There's risk everywhere. This article in particular, like I said, it has to do with an interactive map that you can use, or yes, if you create the worst case scenario does occur. But as Michael said, I'm not a climate scientist. He's not a climate scientist. Nobody on here is a climate scientist, but when you read the IPCC's report, not debating their historical accuracy or anything like that, it says that it's well outside of the range of possible. It's not outside the range. It's the most extreme end of the most extreme end of possibilities is 6 feet, which would be a problem, and that's 100 years or 75 years from now, the year 2100. So,
James, I have a quick heuristic I kind of live by when it comes to this stuff.
Yeah.
When I stop seeing politicians who are sponsoring global warming legislation stop buying vacation homes on coastal waters, then I'll get concerned. But I mean, they don't seem concerned, and they seem to be the most concerned. So I really don't put a lot of credit on articles like this. And I'm with Will. Like, sure, worst case scenario, perfect storm. That could really suck.
Yeah. All right, let's jump to the next article. Rents are rising faster than wages across the country, especially in these cities. They listed Atlanta, Charlotte, Miami, Phoenix, and Tampa with the widest gaps. And it says from 2019 to 2023, rents jumped 30.4%, outpacing the 20.2% wage increase. How's this affecting you guys?
Well, I mean, geez, I'm pretty sure I'm the youngest person on this panel. I'm feeling confident on that one, James. I don't know how old you are, but I'm 32 for context. I mean, look, buying a house is pretty brutal for millennials. The apartment market is obviously pretty brutal. I mean, as an owner, it's great. As someone who is renting, it's pretty tough. But this really, you can get into monetary policy or in terms of interest rates, things along those lines. But it really is just one of those things where we are dealing with multiple decades of an undersupply in the housing market at this point. I can't remember the exact statistic, but you talk about the per capita homes built in 1950 versus today. That's obviously very difficult, or the rate has fallen off incredibly significantly in terms of how many people or how many houses are built. I mean, this is just supply and demand. Obviously, it's concentrated in the Sun Belt for the past few years, but New York has seen really high rent growth now. Two, it's just, we are undersupplied in the housing market, and you are seeing a lot of these places that are listed, Atlanta, Charlotte, Tampa. I can't speak to all of the markets there, but Phoenix, I think Atlanta, Charlotte, and Phoenix, they all have declining rents because there's been such a surge of new supply. So on the one hand, you had 20% rent growth in 2021 and 2022. You are seeing the market respond to that by all of the new deliveries they're taking place because those markets were undersupplied. You're seeing Class A rents fall. As Class A rents fall, that puts less pressure on Class B and C rents. But the housing market, the single-family home market, that's obviously a different beast because 80% of 80% of single-family homes have 30-year fixed-rate mortgages below 5%. So that's just people sitting there, and they're not really incentivized to sell. So that's a long monologue on rents rising faster. The market's responding to it, but it's just a long, multi-decade housing supply issue.
Yep.
I completely agree with Will, and then I'm just going to add on. During COVID, I forget the exact number, but like they almost printed the current money supply. They didn't double it, but they printed half of it. And so I think that pig through the python is still going to take a long time to get through. And so inflation is definitely not under control. And you would expect the effects of inflation that the price of hard assets would always rise faster than wages. It's just one of the painful things about inflation. It's a silent tax. It's especially deadly to retirees and the working class, because there's no way employers are going to pump up wages as fast as asset prices are rising. So I still think we got a long way to get through all the money printing during COVID.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll follow on Jimmy's comments by saying that, when you have too much money chasing too few assets, you have that inflationary effect, and the wage, inflation leads, wage growth follows it, right? I mean, if employees are saying, hey, this is not enough of a salary or pay of what you're giving me, and they start voting with their feet, then businesses start responding, but it's always a lagging indicator. So, you'll typically see a run up in the prices, and then everyone else adjust their businesses accordingly, whether they're lowering prices to get more consumers in, or raising wages to keep the workers they need. It's a lagging indicator. So, as Jimmy was saying, I mean, you can't expect to put that much money into an economy, not have inflationary pressures, and expect that wages should be keeping up in literal lockstep with those price increases. Do I think wages will adjust? Perhaps. I can't really say, but it's not such a big surprise to see a gap like that today in various markets.
Yeah, and then to cap it off, everybody forgot to build inventory after the Great Recession. Like, it's an interesting problem.
Correct. Yeah. I mean, but like, for example, in New York, in markets that are land constrained, let's say primary gateway markets, New York, Seattle, San Francisco, right? They all have their own problems and issues, but they do have these diverse economies that keep chugging along. And when you just don't have enough space to build, you have to go vertical, which makes construction more expensive, and regulation is more difficult. Then you that supply-demand imbalance just gets exacerbated. And if someone's making, I don't know what the average household income is in New York City, but it's probably pretty high. And like Will and I were talking before the show kicked off here, we both used to live in New York. What our rents were there were so much more expensive than anywhere else I've ever lived, and you were willing to pay it because you were making enough money to be able to pay it. So you did it, right? So I think it'll just I think the gap will close, but I think people are just they're not gonna leave a well-paying job where they're getting great experience in a primary gateway city. I think, like me, until they have kids, if they have children, right? There's if you're young, you pay it, you enjoy your life, and then eventually you end up saying, okay, well, I can't spend $6,000 a month on a 2-bedroom apartment, or 3-bedroom apartment, so it's time to go.
Good point.
Hey, James, are we allowed to? I got a slide that I think the audience would enjoy. This helped really crystallize the inventory issue for me.
I don't know. Antonio might know how to do that.
I mean, there is a present button.
Oh yeah, try the present.
I'm gonna try that.
Okay.
Well, you should make sure it's appropriate before you let him put that up.
Yeah.
Watch out.
This is my computer is PG. It'll be completely appropriate.
Okay, good. Think of the children, Jimmy.
I got 4 kids. That's all I think about.
Antonio,
it's not let me do it, but like the quick and dirty of it is this. Our inventory for housing in 2007, right before the crash, was 4 million. We had 300 million Americans. Now we have 335 million Americans, and this is for single family. I'm a single family guy, but we only have a million units available. So there's a real supply and demand issue in the greater economy. That's why if you're on the investor side, man, it's a great place to be here.
Yeah, so Jimmy, just to follow up on that, that's a point I make with people as well, where people are expecting, I've been advocating for, 12, 18 months at this point, that I know Green Street says multifamily values are down 25, 33%, but you don't see the transaction volume. You really don't see a lot of sales where things are transacting at that rate. And people say, oh, it's the next Great Recession, multifamily, single family housing in general is going to take the hit, but it's not the case that there are a lot of adjustable rate bank loans with balloon payments in a situation where you have an oversupply of housing. There's still an undersupply of housing. Even the markets where you're seeing rents go down, I mean, that's going down like 5% after it grew 20% over a 2-year period. So that's not exactly the great financial crisis territory right there. So I don't see the bottom falling out. And the reason I mentioned banks specifically is, a lot of over 2020, 2021, it wasn't banks that were doing a majority of the lending. It was debt funds. And debt funds just don't have the same incentive structures that banks do in terms of having to offload bad loans for regulatory issues and selling at the bottom. So all that's to say, there's still the undersupply of housing, and I don't see the bottom falling out the way a lot of people seem to think it will be, and they're going to be buying new construction lease-up deals below replacement cost at 7 caps or whatever the case. I just don't see it.
Yeah, I agree. I think people have the tendency to fight the last war, and 2008 is so seared into everybody's memory that everybody thinks the next great crisis will be like 2008, but history doesn't, really reveal that it's the same crash is not the cause of the next crash. And then especially in a hyper inflationary environment, I don't see the crisis being caused from hard assets.
Any other comments on that article?
No, I think we all want to talk about BREIT.
Let's jump into it. From Wealth Management, unpacking the firestorm over Blackstone's real estate valuations. Blackstone's non-traded REIT, BREIT, is what it's tagged as. I don't know a whole lot about REITs. I did read the article. Any comments on what's going on and how their valuations play into this?
I'll jump in.
Go ahead. Yeah. No, dive on in. I don't have much to say on this.
I think this is a little similar to this article. That is, they're talking about a New York Times article. Or it's an article about an article, and they're saying that there is a firestorm over Blackstone's BREIT real estate valuations. But you go into the article, and I have experience in valuations. I'm not a REIT expert by any means, but you have in essence is a whole bunch of knowledgeable people saying, well, and by the way, these are third-party people that are saying this, that we don't really see an issue with the way they're valuing their assets. So it's just interesting that they bring this up, saying, well, these things are priced incorrectly, and just back of the napkin, looking at this, the cap rates that they're using on the various asset classes, just my 2 cents, seem perfectly normal in today's environment. So I'm not quite sure what the New York Times was driving at, other than they needed to write something about real estate for that week's column, and they went hunting for something to stir up a hornet's nest over. And when you're talking about valuations, a lot of people don't think about the fact that your assets are worth what someone is willing to pay for them on any given day, right? So that can change drastically by if some exogenous shock occurs, if or any other event occurs, either slowly or quickly. So this notion that they're misvalued is, I think, just headline grabbing stuff, and trying to paint them in a bad light, when I think the New York Times is just trying to sell a newspaper at this point in time.
Well, Michael, I'm going to contest the article, because it's saying they're only doing 10.5% annualized. Like, if their competitors are doing less than that, I have wow, how bad are their competitors? But to expect you guys are multifamily, to expect a 10% IRR since 2017, like, you're undershooting.
Yes.
If I was to get in one of your developments 7 years ago, I'm assuming you're telling me 15 to 16% IRR.
Yeah, typically for deals that we're looking at, it's going to be mid-teens or up, right? Now.
Yeah. So I think the New York Times is pointing out that BlackRock's underperforming.
Right. And I'm not going to necessarily, well, my dispute with that would be that, similar to like Warren Buffett's problems, when you have so much money to put out and you're playing in that institutional space, there's not as much arbitrage as when you get down into the middle market or mom and pop space. It just doesn't exist. So I thought what you thought.
I'm with you. If I were to meet the guy who wrote this article just to aggravate him, I'd be like 10.5%. Yuck. They're underperforming. This is real estate.
Yeah.
You got to be talking at least mid-teens to say something interesting.
Correct. Yeah. Yeah. I saw that too, and I said, yeah, you're right. They're underperforming. They're using reasonable cap rates. They're institutional capital. They're not going to get the high returns that a mid-market, lower middle market, mom and pop type investor would get, because there's just not as much arbitrage in that market. So, I'll stand by my earlier statements about what the Times was driving at.
And it's a completely misleading title. It makes it look like you got a BlackRock guy in his basement just indiscriminately valuating property. They still used a third party.
Yeah,
correct.
The only thing they could do to make it more, valid is to hire another third party to validate the other third party's thing. But I would say that doesn't make a bunch of financial sense.
Right. Correct. So I think it's a much ado about nothing.
That's the beauty of this show, is we can cut through the BS.
James, here's an interesting topic.
Yeah.
Real estate investors, when it comes to the New York Times and when it comes to Wall Street, we are the redheaded stepchildren of the investing world. Like the sky's always falling. Somebody's always doing something shady. But if you were to look at CNBC year in and year out of real estate, we should have had another crash every year since 2012, where, nationally, the median home price in the last 20 years, and it always does this, it always doubles. So, for newbie investors, be very wary of the media and how they play with real estate numbers.
Yeah. They're just doing their job. They're getting people to read, right?
Yeah, they're selling advertising.
Yeah.
Right. And I to go off of what Jimmy is saying, I mean, reading articles while also reading between the lines, I think is a skill that a lot of people should consider utilizing more often, because you can't just take it at face value. Go look at the actual hard data that's being put out there and read the tea leaves yourself. Don't just trust what an article says. I mean, certainly the title of an article is a hook, right? That's designed to get you to click or read, so that they can, especially online, the longer you're looking at an article, the more ads that can be served, et cetera, et cetera. So, and call us jaded, but that's the business model. So just recognize it for what it is, and study your own data. Go look at the Bureau of Labor Statistics. There's tons of great free government data out there, broker reports. That's the stuff that investors should be looking at and absorbing, versus paying attention to the latest headlines all the time. Because it is a lot of fear and, like Jimmy was saying, doom and gloom all the time, but fear sells, and it works. It sells papers.
I mean, guys, I feel like we're being really mean to the New York Times here. I mean, let's just give them a break. BREIT has some of the most sophisticated investors in the world. Right. So if they're buying in, they clearly agree with the value. Could they be wrong? Absolutely. Plenty of people were wrong in 2006 when they were buying stuff. But, if you spend all your time focusing on real estate, I don't know who the author of this is. Maybe they spent one day writing an article. I don't know. But if BREIT's investors are happy with the valuations, then, it's like any syndication deal you put together. I was joking recently that anytime you bid on a deal, there's 10 other people bidding on it. You set your price and you lose. That's an opportunity to really reflect. Did they see something you didn't see? Did they have a better strategy than you did? And after a good 24 hours of self-evaluation, you decide they overpaid. These people,
yeah.
It's a humble approach to things, BREIT has really sophisticated investors. There are a lot of the best institutional groups, hedge funds, pension funds, all those groups. If they're happy with the valuations, they're happy with them. And look, the New York Times could be right. Maybe it is overvalued. Maybe it'll be a correction. But that's the thing about, people are bad at predictions, especially ones about the future. So time will tell on that, but the investors seem happy.
Well, and then right now, all those big hedge funds are in the media's crosshairs. So if they sneeze in the wrong direction, there's going to be a negative news article about it.
Yeah, 100%.
Right. Yeah. And well, to your point, I'm sure there's the ability for these sovereign wealth funds, hedge funds, PE shops, whoever's investing, to redeem their money, to walk in and say, okay, it's time for us to, we're not happy with this. We want to cash in our chips, and money votes with its feet, right? Customers vote with their feet. They can choose to leave. That's the beauty. I'm going to champion capitalism here. That's the beauty of capitalism. You don't like it, you go elsewhere. You don't have to invest with BREIT. So this hubbub over valuations from a third party who's not involved in the business, who has no money in it, I think it's a waste of ink, quite frankly.
Okay, I do want to ask one more question, if anybody knows it, and we can table this one, which is, I knew that the New York Times was part of the Writers Guild, which means they might have a pension fund. Do we know if the pension fund is invested in BREIT?
That is
It's
a
definitely investment.
fantastic question.
Glory, I like the way your mind works, Will. That's
Yeah.
genius.
Did they short it? Would be a better question. Did they short BREIT? Can you short BREIT? I
Right.
don't know.
Yeah, we'd
I
like to
don't-
talk to the investment manager for the New York Times, for the Guild pension fund,
That's awesome.
and look at their holdings.
I mean, the great thing here's the real conspiracy. I bet you someone from BREIT paid this guy to write the article because now I know about BREIT and I'm interested in investing in it.
I mean, okay, just to push back on that, that's, they would have said it was undervalued if they wanted you to rush to it. So they would have said everything
No,
was
it's
undervalued.
reverse. It's reverse psychology.
There you go.
Yeah, you're right. It was a signal to everybody who doesn't like the New York Times. The New York Times thinks X, so you have to believe the opposite of X. Like, go for it. It's a negative polarization effect on BREIT. Steven Schwartzman does it again. That guy cannot be stopped.
All publicity is good publicity.
Okay, we've made fun of the New York Times, but what about San Francisco? Come on.
All right, let's jump into the next one. From Benzinga, real estate developer soaked by multi-million-dollar loss on San Francisco office building. Clarion Properties had a $60 million loss on a property they purchased for $86 million in 2019.
So there's a paper loss, or they legit sold the house?
Sounds like they sold it to
Or sold the development?
New York Life Real Estate Investors and Bridgeton for $22 million. Yeah. And they had defaulted on a $39 million loan too, which caused the sale.
I mean, I'll be honest, this article, maybe I skimmed it too roughly, but they're saying they bought it for $86 million.
Mm-hmm.
They sold it for $22 million, but there was a $39 million loan. Just doing the math, that means there is $37 million of equity. So how did Clarion lose $60 million? If they lost all their equity, they would have only lost 37. Now, I guess you could say unless they were the lender and the equity, it seems like they only lost 37 million. But office is just in a tough spot. Period.
Yep.
It was the golden asset class in 2000, leading up to 2020. Office was considered the gold standard. It was the best asset class for a lot of institutional investors, and obviously, COVID represented a paradigm shift that a lot of these places have not recovered from. As much fun as it is to make fun of San Francisco, I'm sure there are some offices in the story in office seems to be that it's all Class A space. It's the newest construction. It's the A+ office that has the highest rents. Those still command properties. I don't know what year 410 Townsend Street was built, but the older office product is really suffering just because of all the changes that have happened because of COVID.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, this was my real estate sort of instinct is always to Google the property right away, do the Google walk around it. I'm not familiar with San Francisco, only been there a handful of times, and I have not been to this neighborhood, but it's right near the ballpark. And with a lot of new development around there, what seems to be mostly multifamily housing, but this building looks like it's 76,000 square feet. If they paid $86 million for it, that's over $1,100 a square foot. Yeah. So I was just playing with some numbers. It's like if you put I don't know what cap rates are for office, especially since San Francisco has I think a 34% vacancy rate across all office. But if you put a 5.5 or 6 cap on it, you're talking with a 40% expense ratio. It's really they need like about $100 a square foot in rent for a building that looks like it was waterfront warehouse at some point. And I'm sure it was because it's right on a canal, but it's probably cool, creative, retrofitted, brick and beam office space, but $100 a square foot, that's pretty rich. But at 22 million with similar cap rates, with similar expense ratios, they really only need to command about $25 a square foot. So I don't know how far the rents have fallen, but I would say, like Will was alluding to, the tech world sort of eating its own, right? If, all these new tools are the ones that have enabled companies and employees to work from anywhere, work from home, etc. The folks that worked in that building are probably some of the ones that are close to the products that help this property valuation collapse. So it's just part of the ever evolving nature of an economy, and real estate as the laggard.
Yep. Well, hey, let's jump into the next article, unless you guys have more comments on that one.
So, Michael, you don't think that's a sign of an imminent real estate panic?
Nope.
Okay, good. That's what
Nope.
that article made me worry about.
Nope. No, I don't believe you, Jimmy, but because it's all market and product specific. Come on, say it with me, Jimmy.
Yeah. I mean, me being a Midwest guy in St. Louis and Little Rock, whatever people are doing in San Francisco, and I got buddies who flip houses in San Francisco, I do not believe we're in the same industry. I think it's a different ball game.
Yeah. I would agree with that.
All right. From Zillow, renters need to make $80,000 to comfortably afford the typical U.S. rental, from an April 2024 rental market report.
What are they calling the typical rental?
Good question.
They're talking about a one bed or a single family home. They're getting into both.
So $80,000. So here's some interesting data, but you can almost go back to like Roman times to say, hey, people are going to spend a third of their income on housing, like no matter what. So housing's going up. What you need to make to have it depends. I guess I'm trying to figure out what they're calling the average rental.
I mean, Jimmy, I'll be the first to admit I do not know anything about the ancient Roman housing market. So that is just like, I have nothing to add on that. I don't know how that system was structured. But I mean, this just goes back to one of the first things we talked about. The cost of housing is rising faster than the growth of wages. The growth in housing is growing faster than the growth in wages, which again has to do with an undersupply issue. I mean, obviously inflation is a part of that, but it remains undersupplied because of decades, and particularly the last 15 years, we just haven't built enough.
Yeah. So if you make $80,000 a year, that means you make $6,600 a month. So that means you're going to spend $2,200 in rent. I don't think that sounds outlandish or crazy, especially if we're talking about, did Zillow say the entire United States?
Yeah, it's they're covering initially the whole U.S. Right. One beds are just shy of $2,000 at $1,997 a month. Single families are $2,200 a month, and then they get into some markets where rents have risen the most. So I'm with you. I don't know how alarming it is. I mean, if you're, they're blending in major metro areas with more rural areas, right? Primary cities with secondary, tertiary cities. So, a $2,200 rent in New York, you and I would have probably killed for that apartment. That's very cheap, but
maybe maimed and crippled. Maybe maimed or crippled, but certainly not killed. I have a line.
Yeah, but in the Midwest, you're like $2,200 a month for rent. Like, oh my God, no way.
Correct. So
I see this article as a basic math formula. Like most people always pay a third of their income to housing. What do bankers look to what you can buy off of? Generally, they multiply your monthly income, or they divide your monthly income divided by 3. That's your mortgage payment. Boom, that's what you can afford.
Yep.
I was just in Ogallala, Nebraska this weekend, talking to a guy that worked at the Arby's there. And he's like, Denver's so expensive. It's like an apartment's $1,200. He's like, that's so crazy. Like I pay $500 or something in Ogallala. So it's like his viewpoint is a lot different.
Yeah, it depends on your past experience, right? What you're used to, what you're making, what you expect to make. Yeah, I mean, if you're $500 a rent, I haven't seen that since I don't want to go back that far. I don't want to date myself. But you know, I don't know if part of the point of the article was that, you know, you need to make this much money to be able to afford the average. But again, I have an appreciation for, you know, the data, but the generalizations that they make, where they say they're just lumping every market into one article, that doesn't really tell you about, you know, Jimmy's market or Will's market or my market or your market, James, and what the rent to income is in that market, right? If you know, if it's New York, I don't know what the average household income is. Let's say it's $100-something thousand, and if rent is $2,700 on average throughout the whole city, that's a reasonable ratio, as Jimmy was pointing out, right? And the $500 ratio that you were mentioning is for rent is probably 30% of what that individual is making. So yeah, it's all local. It's all you have to look at the actual market reports, not just the overall data.
And then a number I put, the word average, I put the least amount of stock generally in that statistic. Have you guys ever read Nassim Taleb?
Yes.
Black Swan, Anti-Fragile. I forget which book it is, but it's like, I stopped really giving a lot of credit to average when he describes it like this. If you can't swim and you're about to cross a stream where the average depth is 4 feet and you don't know if you're going to step into a foot of water or 15 feet of water, is the average really relevant to you at that point?
A good point.
Like average can be very, you know, you could, let's say you had to watch your grandma for 12 hours and for the first 6, you put her at 100-degree heat. And then the back 6, you put her at 20-degree heat. And, you know, she passes away and you're like, I don't get it. The average temperature of the room was 65 degrees. Why wasn't she comfortable?
That's a cheerful analogy.
Yeah, thanks, Jimmy.
That's not me. That's Nassim Taleb. But that really helped me hit home. Just like
Probably could have stopped after crossing the river, you know?
I really wanted to hammer it home. The grandma analogy always gets somebody.
You did it. I need to read his stuff. I've heard a lot about him.
It's the best.
Yeah.
Sure, it's the best without it.
Go ahead.
Just, you know, a note on Zillow. In fairness to them, they didn't do. This is not the headline you see every now and then where it's like someone on minimum wage can't afford a median apartment. It's like, well, yes, because you're making as little money as possible in a job, and of course you're not going to end up at the median. You should be at the far left tail. So, you know, give Zillow some credit for that. They are dealing in average. You need 80,000 to hit an average apartment. So,
yeah. It did mention in the article that there's concessions are common. 33.6% of rentals on Zillow were offering concessions. So it's balancing out, right?
Yeah. Again, they're painting that as, you know, 33%, right? So a third are offering concessions.
Yep.
What percentage of those apartments that are listed do those units represent out of the whole pool of rental units in the United States, right? if only 1% of the rental units in the United States are on Zillow, it doesn't really tell you much. If 30% are on Zillow, then that tells you something. But, and also, what class are they? Are these Class A properties that are being leased up in Sunbelt cities, where, from what I have read, there is some overbuilding. So I think they might be painting it in a worse light than it actually is. So again, the going back to what you guys were saying earlier, averages. My question is always, well, what's the denominator, right? You're saying X number of units. Well, out of how many units? Don't leave out the other side of the equation. There, you have to give me the context to be able to see how large or minuscule this statistic is. It could be de minimis or irrelevant, but again, I think they're trying to grasp for the big numbers and rent drops of X and rent increases of Y, which is fine, but I think they fail to leave out some numbers like so many news sources do, unfortunately.
Yeah. Well, hey, let's take a break to learn about one of our sponsors.
Join renowned note investor and host Nathan Turner at the 9th Annual Diversified Mortgage Expo in the heart of Music City, Nashville, Tennessee. This May 31st through June 1st, experience the world of note investing at the DME Note Investing Conference. Across 2 action-packed days, engage in 18 informative sessions covering everything from first and second lien mortgages to seller-financed paper and institutional loans. Whether you're a seasoned investor or just starting out, the DME 2024 is your gateway to learning from industry leaders. Hosted by DME organizer Nathan Turner at the Hilton Nashville Airport Hotel, enjoy a venue that's perfectly tailored for learning and networking, with quiet seating areas ideal for one-on-one meetings. And outside the conference space, feel free to explore Nashville's rich heritage and vibrant culture. Don't miss out on the opportunity to network with hundreds of investors, institutional sellers, industry experts, and high-quality service providers. Grow your knowledge, expand your network, and elevate your business. Act fast by April 30th to take advantage of early bird ticket pricing. It's not just a conference, it's where the note industry meets to learn, network, and grow. To get your tickets now, visit UnitedStatesRealEstateInvestor.com/DME 2024. That's UnitedStatesRealEstateInvestor.com/DME 2024. The Diversified Mortgage Expo. Learn, network, grow. See you in Nashville.
All right. Nathan Turner's been a guest on this show as well. He is a beast in note investing. All right, next article from MoneyWise. 68-year-old Montana man begs for moratorium on property taxes after his bill reached $8,000 a year, up from $895. It's a 790% increase. Yikes. Any comments?
Same thing's happened to the Duttons on Yellowstone. They're going to have to sell the ranch because they can't cover the property taxes.
Right?
So, I mean, you see this in a lot of places. I know California, I don't remember what prop it had, but they limited the amount you can increase taxes in any given year by making, I believe it was a constitutional amendment. States like Texas have a homestead exemption, which allows you to maintain a lower level for your primary residence. I don't know if it has anything to do with being above a certain age, but I do know that Texas has a way to keep your property taxes down. South Carolina has essentially a user exemption. So if it's your primary residence, you can get lower taxes as a primary user. But again, I feel, I don't want to say this is a monocausal explanation, but it's the third time I've brought this up. But you have increasing home values. I don't know how long I don't know how long Kurt has owned his home, but home values keep going up. The cost of running local governments keeps going up. They need to raise the money somewhere, and inevitably, they're going to see property taxes as the way to do it, unless you have some sort of state amendment or law or something like that stating that you can only increase them by so much money. But I was saying monocausal explanation. Why are property values in Montana so high? I imagine it's easier to build than a lot of places, but a lot of people want to move there. Montana's really attractive to a lot of people, probably because of Yellowstone. Who knows? I haven't seen the show. Don't judge me.
Oh my God, Will! Yeah. The next week, you just need to binge watch Yellowstone, so you can show up next week and discuss real estate issues like ranching in Yellowstone.
Somehow, it's on my. I'll get to it right away. Top priority.
All right, you got to move it up there. I think it also stresses the importance of a real estate investor. This is a not talked about subject that often, but is liquidity. Real estate never fails, but the borrower's liquidity can. So, if you're getting into a deal and it's razor thin, and let's say some government bureaucrat does increase your taxes exponentially, does that mean you're in the red for that deal, or do you have enough liquid reserves for you to be all right? But I am also concurring that we can relate everything we've discussed on this podcast to money printing and inflation.
I was going to point out too, it says 97% of local tax revenue does come from property taxes, at least there. So that's a major income source.
Yeah, I mean, look, I'll admit to being incredibly biased in this regard because I like buying real estate, but this is one of the issues you have with property taxes. The assets are illiquid. People are sitting there for a long time. They pay their mortgage, and it's essentially paying rent to the government for your property every year, as opposed to sales taxes and other forms of consumption taxes. But, I'm biased, totally self-interested in that regard. I can't make that clear enough. But, yeah, this is just one of those things where the city governments, county governments, state governments, whichever layer of government, they're going to want to collect revenue. And I'm sure the value of Montana real estate has skyrocketed, maybe not 780%, but it's an unfortunate situation. You've seen other states pass laws to address this, like California, as mentioned earlier, like Texas, as mentioned earlier. And I'm sure it'll only be a matter of time before Montana tries to address something like this, especially if there are additional stories in this regard.
Yeah.
Yeah. If I can add in that, as an investor, I'm not a fan of government, overreach. But when it comes to affordable housing, and in this case, keep taxes affordable so that seniors or people who don't have capital can stay in the homes, whether it's a rebates or whatnot that they're talking about in the article. I am for those things. For affordability, it's like 80-20 housing, right? Building 20% affordable, 80% market, or whatever mix that is. I do not like to see folks in this individual's situation get sort of, he's not getting forced out of his house at this point. It sounds like he's making ends meet, but it's starting to become such a great burden for him in his later years that I do have empathy for individuals in this situation. And I do think there should be some sort of some relief, so to speak, for individuals like this on a state level. That said, if the state of Montana is getting 90-something%, let's see, it's 97% of local tax revenue that goes towards, or property tax is 97% of all local tax revenue. So what that individual and others have not been paying since he bought that house in 1995 are all these other taxes. That you although like a sales tax on, if you buy a drink in a store, that's a consumption-based tax. I don't know which one I'm for more, having no sales tax or just lumping it all into your property tax. But the other side of the coin is this individual has not been paying all these other taxes that would come that would be put upon him in almost any other market that has sales taxes as well as property taxes. So governments, with the increase in the prices of everything, sure, governments have certainly had to bear the higher costs of labor and materials as well. But this individual's taxes went up by 790%, I think it said, over 30 years. So what's 790 divided by 30? 26% a year. That's I've never seen a number like that before. So I don't know if it was, an area that was just so inexpensive to live in originally, and now the demand is so high that property values shot up. Does the municipality actually need that much money? Because I think it said they have a massive surplus, which means they're overtaxing people. So they should drop the taxes, or drop the mill rate, or drop the assessed values, one way or another. But I'm glad it's being exposed, and hopefully this individual and folks like him get some sort of relief, because that much of a run up just is I think it's untenable for anybody.
Yeah. All right, from United States real estate investor, Simi Valley real estate agent faces multiple felony charges in fraud case. This guy has 13 felony charges, including forgery, grand theft, and money laundering. He got himself in trouble. Any comments on that?
The only thing I will say on this is it's an ongoing legal case, so my commentary is bad if true, and that's about it.
Yeah.
There's just so much money out there to be made. No need to lie, cheat, and steal.
If
Follow the
true.
rules and work hard, do your best. Yeah.
Well,
allegedly, don't lie, cheat, and steal. But my attitude on this one is like, there's so much money to be made out there. Like, why risk it with some form of lying, cheating, or stealing?
Yeah, he's in big trouble if they wrap that up.
Yeah, I'll also say as advice that this is sort of dad advice, if you will. I'm a dad. My dad told me this a long time ago. Don't ever sign anything unless you fully read it, fully understand it. Even if there's one thing you don't understand, go get counsel, pay them the money to make sure that you're not getting into something you don't understand. And I think that's from at least from what the article alludes to. I think the individual said I didn't understand what I was signing. So I completely agree with Jimmy. Right, ethics are of utmost importance. But as an individual, you have to look out for yourself. You have to protect your own interests. And, reading legal documents is not fun, admittedly. But brew a pot of coffee, stay up late, do whatever you got to do. Read the whole thing, dog ear it, mark it up, go find an attorney and pay them to provide you an opinion, because it just might save you a massive, massive headache, such as the one this individual is going through, which is horrifying.
Yeah. Like one of our main businesses is rent to own, lease options. So there's 2 contracts there, and we always tell our buyers, hey, if you want, and we recommend, go get an attorney and look this over. They're pretty simple compared to other rent to own companies, but we want them to have representation because it protects them and it protects us. We don't want them coming back and saying, hey, we didn't understand this and we tried to wing it on our own. So we actually have a place in our docs for an attorney or at least a real estate agent representing them to look that over and help them understand it. But that's because we're ethical. Any other comments on that one? If not, back to article from United States Real Estate Investor, our parent company. Goldman Sachs, unprecedented commercial real estate, $7 billion bailout.
This is a great example of there's a hole in the market. Banks don't want to fill it right now. Either they don't want to or they can't due to regulatory issues. Goldman Sachs sees the opportunity. There's clearly demand for debt, especially after the 2020 and 2021 and even 2022 bridge financing situation. So Goldman Sachs is looking to fill the void.
Yeah.
You guys remember It's a Wonderful Life?
Barely.
Are we talking about how Mr. Potter's the real hero because he doesn't give out subprime mortgages?
We're talking about how, remember there's a run on the bank and Potter's like, I'll give you 50 cents on the dollar for your shares in the building and loan. And George Bailey comes on. He's like, Potter's buying. He's not selling. It seems like Goldman's making the same move here. They see a little bit of shaky financing. They're going to go in and be like, oh, I'll bail you out. By bail you out, meaning adding things to their balance sheet that they want on there because they understand long-term it's going to be a great investment.
Yeah.
So, one man's bailout's another man's great investment.
True. Michael, do you have any comments on that one?
No, I agree with both Jimmy and Will. There's a gap here and a need. They're filling it. It's really that simple. So yeah, I don't have anything else.
Cool. All right, moving along. From Go Banking Rates. I'm a real estate investor. 10 places I would never buy property. So they list Chicago and New York City due to fiscal issues and high taxes, respectively.
Unfriendly landlord laws.
Nope. Detroit and Cleveland citing high vacancy rates and other risky areas, including San Francisco for its high costs and safety concerns, Baltimore for crime rates, and New Orleans for economic stagnation. And then St. Louis, which you mentioned, right, Jimmy? And Memphis struggling with tenant reliability. And then Washington, D.C.'s complex regulations. Different reasons for each area, I guess.
My first question would be, does this guy actually invest in real estate?
Yeah.
I actually think, Michael, you would have some great insights into this because, look, I'm based in South Carolina. I invest in the Southeast. It has all of the favorable demographic and regulatory and political environments that, you're based in Virginia. You invest in Seattle, which would probably, if it's not in the top 10, it's make somewhere in the top 20, 50 list. There are opportunities to invest in these places. I think no one better than you on this panel could, well, no offense, Jimmy. You can do it too. But yeah, talk about why these difficulties, complexity is a subsidy if you can understand it, and it can create opportunity.
Yeah, in our market, it's high barrier to entry, right? It's very expensive to buy on a per square foot, per pound, per unit basis, however you look at it. And if you can get in, if you have some money to start, and learn the market, and I would recommend this for any market anyone's going into, But it is a difficult market to start out in because of that high cost, and it's a dense urban city as well that creates a whole host of problems too. But ultimately, what we've experienced is if you can get into a market like that, which admittedly it's not for the faint of heart, but if you can get into a market like that, what we found out is even though the laws are not as landlord friendly as I'll just take the whole Sun Belt, right? It's on the political spectrum, it's a blue city versus a red city, right? But at the end of the day, what we've experienced is completely different than what the headlines would have you believe. And that's why, earlier we were all kind of poking holes in, these headlines that are, meant to sell articles and advertising ultimately. And what I mean by that is, yes, the city has its problems. Every city has its problems. But what they're not talking about is that, and I'm only speaking about Seattle specifically, you have a land constrained market, which is on the West Coast, right? Direct access across the ocean to Asia, manufacturing centers. It has one of the largest ports on the West Coast. It has the third highest average household income out of the top 50 largest cities. And it's the most highly educated out of the 50 most largest cities. So and then you have jobs of the future, right? Amazon, Microsoft, a lot of aerospace, and everything from Blue Origin to Boeing, et cetera. You have a lot of cancer research, top-rated University of Washington. It's always ranking very far up there. So you have a very robust, dynamic, deep, well-paid economy and populace. And if your average person in the city is making $115,000 and rents are, let's say my one bedrooms are on average around $2,000, well, that's a very affordable rent for that individual, for a Class B property that's been renovated, where they can walk to the offices that they work at in Google, or it's a 10-minute bus ride or a 15-minute bike ride. That is a great story. So I think people discount, what's happening in the local economy. What jobs are there, right? And that's what my partner and I have always focused on first. What jobs are driving the demand for real estate, right? Real estate's a lagging indicator, not a leading indicator, right? What are the jobs? And then I'll tell you how many, and then show me the jobs, show me how much people get paid, show me what the industries are, show me how many units are in that market. And if you see a clear demand supply imbalance, well, what will happen then, right? You'll probably fill up those units. They'll just be frictional vacancy. And because we have such high-paying, well-educated tenants, we don't have problems with any of the tenant laws. Someone who has a degree or a master's degree and is working as a nuclear physicist or cancer researcher or engineer at Amazon, they're focused on their jobs and their lives, and they're not trying to pull one over on a landlord and get out of 2-3 months worth of rent. That is not even in their thinking. So yes, the laws are not as friendly as the Sun Belt, but who's really actually using them to their advantage? I think if you go further down market, if you will, to areas that are less affluent, perhaps in the city or outside the city, you're probably going to run into more of those issues where people start playing a little bit of games with paying their rent, slow pay, etc. But at the end of the day, we've had over 9 years, we've only had 2 evictions. So, I think that goes to show that the high quality of the tenants is what we've been buying the whole time. So, you can't just say, oh, the laws are unfriendly towards landlords, so it's not a market I'm going to invest in. I think people are missing out on what's really going on in a particular market and what the experience is of an actual operator, like Jimmy and Will and you, James, have been pointing out. We've been, having some fun poking holes in some of these articles. You can tell as real estate investors that the people writing these articles have never been involved in real estate, right? And so go talk to someone who's working in that market. Let them explain their story to you, because these broad generalizations, whether it's the economy or the average this, the average that, yes, take it into account. You should read it, but you should go talk to Jimmy Vreeland. You should go talk to Will Matheson. You should go talk to James Brown. You should come talk to me and ask what do you see in your market on the ground? Because once you get away from the ground, once you get away from the people that are dealing with the market day in and day out, the information just starts to become white noise at a certain point. And certainly you should back up what they're saying with some market reports, looking at comps, et cetera. But listen to the story of the local operator and what they have to say. And chances are the story is going to make sense, right? You'll get that feeling like, okay, this does make sense. I get it. There is a niche here. So I'm not going to discount, wholesale an entire market just because the headlines are saying something.
Beautifully put.
Like, Michael, it sounds like it's an investor skill to be able to separate the news from the noise.
Yeah, well said.
Yeah.
Yeah, because most of what's out there, I think, is noise, right? And there's nothing wrong with that. Everyone has their opinion, right? People are trying to get information out and provide value with that information. And I think, Antonio and James's program here is providing actual real value, because there are actual real estate operators talking shop, poking holes in the white noise, if you will, and saying, let's, sometimes we're so bold as we're saying, well, we don't believe that, and here's why, or this is not what my experience is. But I put more stock in listening to the people that are actually involved in the market than people that are sitting behind a desk 2,000 miles away from the market that they're writing about. Jimmy, you're smiling at me. What?
I just like when I don't like it exactly when people with different strategies, like I think your strategy is genius. But like when people ask like what real estate strategy should I use, it's like I don't really know. You get rich in your niche. And like the bottom line is every strategy I hate and love, there's someone crushing in it. Like Michael, like I learned something on this podcast today. Like that's the demographics you went through in Seattle. I was not aware of that. But me personally, I don't know if I would want the pressure of being in the big leagues. You know what I mean? I wouldn't want to be in West Coast, like Seattle, San Francisco. And that's just a personal preference of mine. But like when you hear real estate and people discussing strategy, it's a lot like splitting winners. It's like they're at the blackjack table. Well, my 20 is great because I got 2 face cards. Well, my 20 is great because I got 2 10s. Like you're going to win. You're in the United States. You're in the greatest, most robust economy ever, in a great industry to be in. So I completely agree with you. You're like to wholesale discount any strategy or any market because of a headline. It's a tough thing to do.
Yeah. I'll also say that, I've been part of some groups where I'm talking to people from all across the country, had wonderful conversations. And, it's their number one question. How can you invest there? It must be horrible. It must be bedlam. you must not collect rents. And, not to let the cat out of the bag, but, it works for us. Our thesis has played out over these 9 years. You're right, Jimmy. We have a niche, right? People have said, well, why don't you invest elsewhere? And, when you've built something, and I think it takes some discipline to recognize that, especially over the past 2 years, right? The capital markets have been disrupted. To have patience and recognize how good you have it, because everything we've got the market knowledge, we know the streets, we've got the brokers behind us because we've done 30 transactions in 9 years with 3 brokerage houses. So those folks, when we call them, they pick up the phone, and vice versa. We have the education to go with it. My partner and I come from the debt side of the world, asset management, valuations, and to the work it takes to get into a gateway market at the price per unit that we're talking about. It's not easy. So when you have something that's been vetted over 30 transactions, you don't just say, well, I'm just going to abandon this and go to a whole new market and start from scratch. And in 9 years, hopefully, I'm where I am today. So, no market's perfect, right? There's downside to any business, right? If you want to open a pizzeria, if you want to start a consulting shop, this is a business like anything else. There's risks, but I think you're right, Jimmy, that people have to go talk to people that are in the market. And what I learned, my point here, my long drawn out point here, is that what I learned by talking to so many people around the country, even though they had this misconception about Seattle, I realized I can turn it around, so to speak, right? People are shocked to learn some of these facts. And I think some people have broadened their thinking. And at the end of the day, when you talk to people in any business that are, like these folks were potential investors, other syndicators, developers, you name it, when you're getting all this feedback from them, and it's all very similar, unless they're from the West Coast. The West Coast people seem to understand that market. But if it's all very similar, I recognize, well, I have to address that question up front. And I look forward to that question. Not that I'm trying to convert folks, but we have a growth market, primary gateway, 24-hour city market with an incredible economy. And oftentimes people say, well, I don't want to invest here or there, but what they're not looking at is their overall portfolio, right? Do you want to have all your money in one property type, in one market with one operator? Or are you of the age where you should have, similar to a stock or bond or other asset portfolio, should you have some of your money in a growth market if you're of a certain age, right? Should you have, or if you're nearing retirement, you probably shouldn't. You should probably have more of your money in cash flowing stuff. But if you're of a certain age, like my contemporaries, a lot of our former colleagues invest with us, all commercial real estate executives in New York City primarily, they're in their 30s, 40s, and this is a strategy that fits perfectly into their portfolios.
Nice. Love it. Any other comments before we jump to the next one? All right. From Fox Business, homes are overvalued in most of the U.S., and the problem is worse in these 5 states. So they list Tennessee, Arkansas, South Carolina, Montana, and Alabama. It says due to high mortgage rates and housing shortage.
Well, geez, if that doesn't roll into what we were talking about earlier, right? There's a group of states where people want to move to because they're nice places to live. There has not been enough housing built in those states, and people don't want to sell because interest rates were 0 3 years ago, and now they're at 7. So, I mean, I don't, the term overvalued is an interesting I don't know what to make of the term overvalued in this. I mean, if people are paying the price, you could almost say, yes, by default, they're overvalued, or they're the market rate if people are paying what they're asking. But yeah, that's people want to move in these states. The supply hasn't kept up with the demand. It might as well have just said these are the 5 hottest states to move to.
Right.
That's probably the article he copied off of to write this one.
Right. Well, hey, let's take an ad break. Hear from our next sponsor.
Are you looking to elevate your business through exceptional content? Universe Media Publishing is your gateway to success. We understand that in the world of business, content is king, but not just any content. Your business deserves content that captivates, convinces, and converts your audience into clients. At Universe Media Publishing, we specialize in crafting SEO-rich web content, persuasive copywriting, and marketing copy that resonates with your audience. We don't just write, we engage, we connect, and we deliver results. Imagine your brand's voice amplified, your message crystal clear, and your presence dominating the digital landscape. That's the power of partnering with Universe Media Publishing. Don't let your business just blend in. Stand out, be heard, and make an impact. Connect with us at Universe Media Publishing, and let's turn your vision into reality. Visit universemediapublishing.com today. Your story, our expertise. Together, we'll create magic.
Okay, back to the show. From United States Real Estate Investor, California chaos. Residents revolt against Airbnb. They're using city ordinances to seek bans, which I think we're seeing pretty much everywhere. Are any of you guys doing any kind of Airbnb investing yourselves? Nope.
No Airbnb for me. Charleston, South Carolina has had a pretty active Airbnb regulatory scheme for 5+ years at this point. Certain parts of downtown, I believe there's essentially a map of where you can do it versus where you can't do it. A lot of people don't like. A lot of people don't like Airbnbs. Just people, for various reasons. This article reaches some. It's not surprising to see that you're seeing this backlash. I do feel bad for the investors who bought it based on an Airbnb cash flow model, but I've always been an advocate of if you underwrite something for short-term rentals, that's just an excuse to overpay because you can make anything look better. You can make any real estate investment look 3 times better than it should be if you say, I can charge, instead of $2,000 a month in rent, I can get $6,000 at a higher price with 30% vacancy. I mean, it's unfortunate for a lot of people, but we've seen this backlash for 5+ years in a lot of other markets.
Yeah.
I'm going to steal that one, Will. That's a hilarious line.
Thank you. I've been saying that for years.
We're pretty limited here in Denver. Most areas of the Front Range don't even allow it unless it's a primary residence. We've got one in one area, Arvada, that I actually went to a pretty high-end Airbnb yesterday, meet up with some other capital raisers. We were talking about it. Like right now, it's okay. They're cash flowing like crazy. But if they change their laws, they're going to be in a world of hurt. Although it's a beautiful property, I'm sure they could sell it for what they put into it,
Hey, James, I do apologize. There was a scheduling miscommunication, but I have a hard stop at 1:30 Central.
Oh.
So I appreciate you having me on. Really appreciate meeting you, Michael and Will. I'm going to bounce. But thank you very much for having me on.
Okay. Hey, Jimmy, where can people connect with you if you want them to?
Yeah, I'm on LinkedIn and then Instagram at Jimmy Vreeland, and then just jimmyvreeland.com too is my website.
Fantastic. Hey, thanks for being on. It was great.
Sorry about the scheduling miscommunication. See you guys.
Okay, take care.
Yeah.
Cool. Can Will and Michael, can you guys stay on?
Yeah,
Yep, still
absolutely.
here.
Cool. Just got a couple more to get through here. And any other comments on that Airbnb article?
No, I think Will summed it up pretty well. The only maybe the beneficial thing I'll add is, if you're looking at short-term rentals, you should also do what's called a fallback rental analysis.
Yeah.
If you can't rent it out for a short-term rental, what can you get for a long-term rental?
Yeah.
Right. If
Plan B.
Numbers. What's that?
Plan B.
Plan B. What's your plan B? If plan B is nowhere close to working out, hopefully you've dug into the local laws and get tapped into the local sentiment about these units as well before you make a leap.
Yeah, 100%. All right, from Fox Business, city in Florida considered America's best spot to live. Where do other cities stack up? They're saying Naples, Florida was the best city, according to U.S. News and World Report, due to its strong job market. Go ahead.
Yeah, this personally offends me because Charleston had been holding down the top spot on a lot of lists for a number of years. Charleston is still the best place in America to live. I'm completely unbiased in this. Just take my word for it. It's just a great city, great weather. It gets to be 100 degrees in the summer, but you take some wins and some losses, and great jobs. Land, Charleston's clearly number one. It's not Naples, Florida. Michael, I'm sure you agree with me. You don't have anything to say about why Richmond is great, so we can just I think that's a wrap on that topic.
Yeah, I'm a little split. I'll admit it. I'm not advocating for Richmond to be the best city, although I do love living here. But I've spent plenty of time in Charleston and even more time in Naples. I have a very close friend of mine who lives there, and I try to visit as often as possible. I love both places. I think extremely highly of both places for a whole host of reasons. So I cannot be, unbiased about it. So it's difficult for me to make a choice.
I was incredibly unbiased in my analysis, so I don't know what else we could ask for here.
Yep.
Nice. It also mentions Boise, Idaho, Colorado Springs, Colorado, south of me. I'm actually going to be moving there. Greenville, South Carolina, and Charlotte, North Carolina. Let's jump to the next one from ABC 7 Los Angeles. SoCal man's duplex nightmare serves as a warning about predatory investors. So it sounds like a wholesaler got a hold of him and caused some issues. It said he had tenant issues and squatters while away for a medical emergency, which kind of put him in distress. So he signed a contract with a wholesaler who promised financial and legal help, but failed to deliver. That's where I'm like, what kind of promises do wholesalers offer in financial and legal help? Like, that's not their role, right?
Yeah, I think earlier we talked about how you really ought to read every contract that's put in front of you. I think unfortunately this is a case of someone who didn't know what he was getting into.
Yeah.
It sounds as if they didn't get counsel to help him understand, what am I contractually entering into. It's a very sad story. I don't wish it on anybody. The squatter issue is a horrible nightmare as well. I certainly, squatters' rights to me when, someone has a medical issue, they're away. The fact that they're allowing someone to just occupy a house that is legally owned and paid for by someone else, I can't think of many things in real estate that are more egregious than that. So I have empathy for this individual. I hope they come away whole from this. And it's a cautionary tale, again, just to make sure you understand what you're getting into. And in a market like this, where they allow, squatters' rights, even just after a few weeks, I think that's just a political, a massive political issue that ought to be solved to keep, people that have legally saved up, bought their own houses from having to deal with.
Yeah, and this comes up all the time. Wholesalers kind of, out in left field doing things where a lot of states are starting to require them to become licensed realtors, which I think, I'm split on it. If they're ethical, they're doing it right, it's fine. But having that license kind of holds them a little more accountable. So I kind of feel that's probably a good move.
Theoretically, doing everything ethically is a solution to a problem. I've never worked with a wholesaler. I know it was said at the beginning that Jimmy does some wholesaling, so it's unfortunate he wasn't here for this part of the conversation. But this is obviously an unfortunate circumstance. Obviously, don't know what was in the contract that was signed or how any of that went down. But yes, read your contracts.
Yep. All right, next article from Benzinga. Grant Cardone points finger at Biden for soaring rent prices amid wage stagnation. He says he's criticizing him for significant rise in rent prices and amid stagnant wages, attributing the issue to the Federal Reserve under Biden's administration.
Well, just from a high level, to be fair to Joe Biden, we spent a ton of money in 2020 during COVID, and then we spent more money in 2021 pumping that into the system. So, yes, can you blame some certain stimulus and monetary policy on the Biden administration? Sure, but I mean, we just decided during COVID that we were going to spend money like drunken sailors. So, it's not a sole responsibility or anything like that. And yes, the amount of money that's been pumped into the system has resulted in inflation and asset inflation and rents going up and et cetera, et cetera. I mean, we've covered this in 5 different ways in various during various subjects.
Yep. Yeah, Grant Cardone expects the Fed to cut rates. We'll see. Michael, have any comments on it?
Yeah, the Fed's mandate is to keep inflation within a range and have full employment.
Yep.
Right. And they're battling the inflation front right now. So they're trying to avoid what Volcker did in the 80s, which is raise rates. Okay, now we have a few months of data that show that inflation is going down or minimizing, subsiding, what have you. And then they cut rates, and then it came roaring back, and then they had to raise rates even more thereafter. So I Will was saying, this problem started has been going on for a number of years. Like all throughout COVID, we were putting money into the system, and so now they're trying to fix that problem. I know at the beginning of the year, everyone said, "Oh, there's going to be a cut," right, based on the Fed. There's a thing called the Fed dot plot chart, which they put out in their reports, which show where the Fed governors vote on where they think the Fed funds rate is going to be in the future. The majority of them said, 3 cuts, 4 cuts, however many at the beginning of the year, and they keep adjusting them downward. But they have they should be doing that because inflation isn't tamed. So if you want inflation to get tamed, then you really shouldn't blame an administration for that. You should say, okay, yeah, keep the rates where they are, tamp down on inflation, and then you can worry about what you're going to set your rates to later. Because if you lower rates right now, what do you think is going to happen to asset prices again?
Boom, go up.
Right.
Yep. Yeah.
Okay, I'm slightly skeptical of the concept that asset prices are going to shoot up if interest rates go back down, because there is an upward limit to how high a price of a house can go. Purchasing power is still there. So what we've seen obviously in the commercial real estate sector, where returns are, you're looking for a certain IRR, you're looking for a certain cash on cash, you've seen a lot of correction in pricing, or I shouldn't even say necessarily correction. You've seen an adjustment in pricing based on the availability of debt. But in the housing market, you have 80% of mortgages locked below 5% with a 30-year fully amortizing loan. So the reason home prices haven't dropped in the same way that commercial real estate prices has to do with the fact that people are, what did they call it? The Goldilocks. They have the mortgage they don't want to sell out of.
Golden handcuffs.
They have the golden handcuffs with their mortgage. They don't want to sell their mortgage. So that's to say that if interest rates were to drop, are housing prices going to run away the same way they did in 2020 and 2021? It's possible, but I'm skeptical insofar as you would likely see an increase in the supply of available listings, because people would be more freed up to move, which could potentially offset the lower payments that people would be able to pay, because they'd get better financing options. Because if you're going to take the approach that prices would just run away from us based on rates being cut, you would have expected more of a price drop in the single family home market based on, just based on what's happened over the last 18 months. Now, commercial real estate, I agree, commercial real estate valuations would go up, but that doesn't necessarily mean the supply and demand of the rent would change. But that's a long rant.
Well, all right. Let's go to our fun news item from Huffington Post. These 20 Shark Tank products actually live up to the hype. I'll just read them off. Bug Bite Thing Suction Tool, Click and Carry Multi-Bag Handle, Squatty Potty Toilet Tool, Smart Reusable Notebook, Reusable Silicone Storage Bags, Anti-Tangle Sheet Attachments, Flip It Bottle Tops, Car Seat Gap Fillers, Aquapaw Pet Bathing Sprayer Brush, Hair Grabber Tool for the Shower, Sauce Moto in-car sauce holders, Hick Away Hiccup Remedy Device, Vo-Chill Wine Glass Chiller, Scrub Daddy Multi-Purpose Sponges, Ice Beanie Migraine Relief Cap, Fur Oil Skin and Ingrown Hair Oil, the Spatty Jar and Condiment Bottle Spatula, Wearable Sherpa Blanket, Tush Baby Ergonomic Baby Carrier, and Euphoria Color Changing Blush Oil. All right. You guys familiar with any of those?
I'm familiar with the Scrub Daddy. I have heard of none of these other products. I do not watch a lot of TV. I can't say, not an avid Shark Tank watcher.
Oh,
it's a great hotel show, but that's about it.
I love it. Squatty Potty. I know that one.
Yeah, I can't say I'm familiar with anything other than the Scrub Daddy as well. That's we have them on our sink at home.
What is that? What does it do?
It's sort of like a cross between a sponge and steel wool. It's a plastic, the backside of a sponge where it has more texture to it,
right? Where
you can get some baked on stuff off whatever you're scrubbing. It's basically a whole one of those, and it's great. I'm a fan. But the rest of the products, like Will said, I don't watch much TV. I'm not a shopper really, so I'm not familiar with the rest of them.
Right on. Well, that covers the news portion of our show for this month. I'd like to thank our sponsors, Nathan Turner's Diversified Mortgage Expo and Universe Media Publishing. Of course, thanks to our guests, Michael Voulgarakis, Will Matheson, and Jimmy Vreeland for sharing your knowledge and time. Appreciate you guys. In that order, why don't you guys let people know how they can connect with you?
Sure. Will, you want to go?
You've got it.
Okay. You can reach me at sreventures.com. It stands for Southgate Real Estate Ventures. Again, sreventures.com. There'll be a button there that you can reach out if you want to talk, set an appointment about the market or anything real estate.
Yes, and you can reach me at our website, which is mathcap.com, mathcap.com. Join our mailing list, read our monthly newsletter. We try to keep things light, try not to bore anybody with a statistical walkthrough of a St. Louis Fed report. We keep things light, informative, give some good commentary. So you can join our mailing list by and contact us directly through mathcap.com.
Fantastic. Thanks, guys. Again, I'm your host, James Brown, and I show people how to make safe, secure returns through our passive investing in pre-vetted investments. You can join our private investor club and get opportunity alerts by going to legacywealthcollective.com and filling out the form. Also, a huge thanks to our producer, Antonio Holman with United States Real Estate Investor. Follow and subscribe to This Month in Real Estate Investing on YouTube at youtube.com/@United States REI or your favorite podcast app. If you run across any interesting news, events, or good guest suggestions, feel free to share. Just email Antonio at UnitedStatesRealEstateInvestor.com. And remember, when one door closes, another door opens to financial freedom. Thanks, guys.